Hey everybody, it is Friday, April 25th. Happy Arbor Day to all of you and all of your trees. I'm Moshe Wanunu. It's the Mo News Podcast.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. Jill, do you have a green thumb?
I don't. My mother does, but I do not. Do you?
I do. I do. I was actually much better with the plants pre-child. Now I prioritize child's health and well-being over the plan. So I have to say, since Olivia came into the picture here, I'm not as good of a plant daddy as I once was when it was just me and Alex. But I should say, no plants have died on my watch now, several years of us living together through several moves. So I'm proud of that. Try to revive some. A couple times, Jill, I've posted on Instagram where I was like, anybody got tips on this one? Because, you know, certain plants, they need certain water, certain light. They all can't be given the same light and the same water. And so that's super important to customize it. I will say my mom is very good with the indoor plant situation. My father, very good with the outdoor plant situation. He's got a whole bunch of fruit trees in Texas. You know, we pride ourselves, the One Who News, in our cultivation and botany.
Well, I've never met an orchid that I can't kill.
That's actually what I posted on Instagram last year, where it's like, some people know how to revive the orchids. That's one thing I have not figured out is the revival of the orchid. I posted it. I followed some of your tips. Still didn't work out for me.
So yes, if I get an orchid, I have it for a couple of months. I admire it. It slowly starts to just die, disintegrate, whatever it is. That's when I give it to my mom. I forget about it. And then a few months later, I'll be like, is that the orchid? And she'll revive it and bring it back to life.
There you go, folks. Carol Wagner, take your orchids to her. We'll give you the address on Long Island if you have a challenge with them. Speaking of challenges, Jill, just before we tape this podcast, you texted me. You're like, Moshe, give me a few minutes. I got to do the ice bucket challenge with my daughter. And I was like, wait, what year are we living in? And it turns out the ice bucket challenge is back.
Yeah, it was revived again by students at the University of South Carolina, but they're doing it for a different cause. It is called the Speak Your Mind Ice Bucket Challenge. The mind is mental illness needs discussion, which was a way to honor a student who died by suicide. And Moshe has really started to make the rounds, especially amongst kids. That's who I've really seen. Maybe it's because I'm a parent now, but I've seen kids doing it. And my daughter got tagged a couple of days ago. So she went and he did it.
Yeah, I remember doing it back in 2014. It was ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, that go around that summer. Doing it with a bunch of my friends, challenging a few others. I remember celebs got in the mix. I feel like President Obama got in the mix back then. Trump got in the mix. Important cause nonetheless, mental health awareness. So Jill, did your daughter tag you now? Do you have to do it?
No, you know what? I gave her suggestions of who to tag. It's very, very mindful not to tag me.
Well, it's going to come around. If we're not doing it this week, we'll probably end up doing it at some point in the next month.
But by the way, that initial ALS Ice Bucket Challenge, they raised so much money with that. That they actually did discover some new scientific findings. There was a large-scale genetic study made possible by the money from the Ice Bucket Challenge that identified several new genes that are associated with a risk of ALS.
Yeah, the numbers, at least in the first few weeks of that challenge, more than 10 years ago, they raised more than $115 million that summer. So pretty remarkable.
All right, now let's get to some headlines here. Some new numbers on home sales show a very big drop in March. But what does that actually mean for people who are looking to buy a home? Overseas, a massive Russian strike on Ukraine overnight Wednesday. What President Trump has to say about it. To Iran, which is now looking at reaching an interim deal with the United States on its nuclear program. Will President Trump play ball? A big election coming up in Canada. Who is in the running and what's at stake? The Highland Park mass shooter who opened fire at a July 4th parade back in 2022, sentenced to life on Thursday. And in lighter news, more couples are living separately. They are calling it Apart-Ners. Get it? We'll tell you all about this new trend and if it really even is a new trend.
Apart-Ners, like apart partners?
Yes.
I got it, Jill.
Plus, it is Friday. Cheers to the freaking weekend. What we are watching, reading, and eating.
Jill, it turns out we're going to be binging the same show this weekend. I look forward to your review.
Oh, you. That's your hint.
Get it?
All right, let's start with the real estate market. Some new numbers out Thursday show an overall slowdown when it comes to home sales in the United States. According to the National Association of Realtors, existing home sales fell nearly 6% in March compared to the prior month. That is the biggest monthly decline in more than 2 years. Spring is a critical time of year for the real estate industry. It's usually the busiest time for home sales, and that's because a lot of buyers, particularly parents, are looking to get into the market, and they usually want to be in a new home by the fall, which is when the school year starts. For sellers, they often wait until the spring when their homes look the best, the flowers are blooming, and when demand is up. But this year, experts say that economic uncertainty is putting a big damper on the market. But finally, it does appear for home buyers that inventory is up at least slightly. Many prospective sellers had been waiting on the sidelines as mortgage rates were extremely high. They didn't want to put their homes on the market and give up some of the lower interest rates that they may have secured a few years ago. Right now, mortgage rates are holding above 6.5%. But now experts say that some home sellers simply can't wait any longer. Of course, you've got people who maybe need to move for a job, or maybe empty nesters who just don't want to keep such a big home and are looking to downsize. So the big question that we're getting anyway is, does this mean that home prices are coming down? Not necessarily. And it also depends on the area. Home prices actually rose in March on a national basis. And that's because the inventory, meaning the number of homes on the market, is still lower than we were seeing pre-pandemic. But Moshe, as we talked about earlier this week, some areas aren't quite as hot as they used to be. So places like Texas and Florida, there are just a lot more homes on the market and potentially room in those areas to get a better deal. Places in the Northeast, still very, very low inventory.
Yeah, when you look at the Redfin Home Price Index here, in March, they looked at all the metro areas. Columbus, Ohio, slightly down. Denver, slightly down. San Jose, California, slightly down. San Francisco, up. Nassau County, New York, up 2.5%. Milwaukee, Wisconsin, up just under 2% there. So to your point, regionally, you see different trends here. This data, by the way, from March is all before Liberation Day, the day that Trump declared all those tariffs, which led to more economic anxiety and the feeling from a number of people that, hey, maybe I should sit on my money right now and not make any major moves, especially when it comes to purchasing a home. In the past, people tend to put off major purchases like a house when there's some concern about the state of the economy here. During those chaotic few days around the tariff increase, the mortgage rate, actually the 30-year mortgage went up above 7% again. Now, as you mentioned, slightly under 7%. But consumer confidence has worsened in recent weeks. And again, that's pre-tariffs and now even more post-tariffs. So right now, it does appear that buyers that are willing to buy do have some more negotiating power. Almost 1 in 4 listings on Zillow got a price cut in March. That is the highest proportion for any March since at least 2018. About 44% of purchases, nearly half of purchases in the first quarter, included some sort of seller concession. That's according to Redfin. But home purchases are still unaffordable, especially for some first-time buyers. The national median existing home price in March is just about $403,000. That's up about 3% over last year. And as we said again, it really depends on where you're buying, where the inventory is. Sometimes it's based on neighborhood, sometimes the county, the state, or the region that you're in. Jill, when we talked about what we were leading the podcast with yesterday, I was like, well, we got to lead it with this also, because this is a story that, for lack of a better term, hits close to home for you.
Yes, Moshe, we are in the market for a new home, and it's been very difficult. Long Island, as you were mentioning, still one of those places where there's not a lot of inventory, some of the lowest inventory in years, which is keeping prices extremely high. And I can tell you from personal experience, a quote unquote good house, which is, a good house, it has good bones, doesn't need a lot of work, in a good location, and priced well, not too overpriced, will literally sell in one weekend. And we've ended up in bidding wars, which unfortunately we have been on the losing end of.
Well, I'm wishing you good luck here, Jill, because we were trying to debate here that based on the trend lines on the economy, et cetera, like if this is not so good for sellers, is there a win here for buyers? But it really depends on where you're at, what position you're in, and also, the decision that you have to make given the larger economy, right? Which is it time to be a buyer of a home, even if there are some sellers who are incentivized to sell right now? So sending you good vibes right now, Jill.
Thank you, Moshe. And you know what? To the point of the story, as we were just mentioning, you could try to time the real estate market, but ultimately your life is what determines when you may need to move or when you need to buy. So some people may have the luxury of being able to wait a year or two in either direction. But people like us, for example, we need to be in before the start of the school year. There's other people who might need to sell because they have to move or whatever their circumstance is. Okay, now to the war in Ukraine. A day after President Trump seemed to point fingers at Ukraine for not accepting a peace and ceasefire deal with Russia, Russia launched the deadliest assault on Ukraine's capital of Kyiv since last summer, killing at least 12 people, injuring almost 100, with thousands fleeing underground to the country's subway system to take shelter from dozens of missiles. President Trump responding by issuing a rare public critique of Moscow, writing on Truth Social, quote, Vladimir, stop. 5,000 soldiers a week are dying. Let's get the peace deal done. He said he was not happy with the Russian strikes. He called them not necessary and very bad timing.
Jill, I got some notes that some people read that Trump tweet in the tone of White Lotus. Piper, no. Vladimir, stop.
It fits.
Vladimir, stop. I wonder if there's like a code there that he's using, like he's using his first name, like what the meaning is behind that exact social media post.
President Trump, meanwhile, talked about the status of the peace talks during a bilateral meeting with Norway's prime minister on Thursday. Reporters asking Trump about the framework for the peace plan, which proposes significant sacrifices from Ukraine, including the U.S. recognition of Crimea as Russian territory and Ukraine ceding large swaths of territory to Russia. As we reported yesterday, Vice President Vance called to, quote, freeze the territorial lines at some level close to where they are today. So, Moshe, this was pretty revealing. A reporter asked the president what concessions Russia was making as part of the deal. And here's a bit of their back and forth.
What concessions has Russia offered up thus far to get to the point where you're closer to peace?
Stopping the war, taking the whole country. Pretty big concession.
So notable there that Trump is saying basically the concession Putin is making is he's not going to take all of Ukraine. His impression, Trump's impression, is that effectively this war goes on. It'll only get worse for the Ukrainians here, partially because the U.S. has cut back on continuing to give them aid here. So Putin over time here, as the larger military and the larger country, will be able to wear Ukraine down. So effectively what Trump has been saying here to Ukraine is take the deal. It sucks, but he occupies 20% of your country and you just have to accept that. Ukraine says not so quick. That's not really what we had in mind here. We would like an actual negotiation, given that this is not his territory. Vladimir Putin took Crimea 10 years ago. He took another significant swath of Ukraine over the last 3 years here, and we would like at least some of it back, given that it's not his. Trump again saying, nope, the deal here is he's in a stronger position, and so it's time for you guys to recognize that and just have to accept that that is part of the deal. On top of that, and as I mentioned yesterday on the podcast, Ukraine is getting a pseudo security guarantee, but it isn't very detailed here. And it also doesn't involve the largest military on earth, the United States. It's some sort of European, hybrid, non-European security force that would go in there and ideally, as far as they're concerned, prevent Putin from restarting the war at some point once he's resupplied and restocked. The question the Ukrainians have is, well, will that be enough to stop Vladimir Putin here? And will it be large enough, especially without U.S. support? So that's one of the concerns the Ukrainians have. Nonetheless, Trump does not like that Putin continues to bomb Ukraine on a daily basis, killing civilians in Ukraine. Trump asked about this yesterday, said, listen, Putin took Crimea back when Obama was president. That wasn't under my watch, and they didn't really fight back. So I don't really see a point in negotiating that away. It's been Russian now for more than 10 years after they took it, and not my business. As far as the eastern provinces are concerned, again, it is the U.S. saying to Ukraine, you guys are going to have to just deal with it at this juncture. Now, a bunch of European allies concerned about this. They're concerned about this proposal. They think it's too Russia-friendly. And even then, Putin is still pushing for more and more here. And to Trump's frustration, continuing his military attacks on Ukraine on a daily basis here. One thing that concerns other Western powers here, how China is looking at these negotiations. The fact that Trump is taking the term is realpolitik view of the world. This is reality. We just have to confront it. And how China will look at, I don't know, a potential invasion of Taiwan and how that might be viewed by the West. particularly the U.S. The concern for a while and the idea for a while was that China wouldn't know how the U.S. would react if they invaded Taiwan. Now, keep in mind that China has wanted to take back Taiwan now going back decades. But they've always been concerned with how the U.S. might react. The U.S. has given Taiwan a lot of weapons. Would the U.S. intervene on behalf of Taiwan? Would they actually engage militarily against China? And what they see here, these concessions to Putin, despite the fact that he invaded Ukraine here, there's concern that China might view that as a green light to take Taiwan because they're like, well, the Americans don't seem really keen on getting involved in a war here, so let's just take it while Trump is president. So that is one of the major storylines that, stuff that happens in one part of the world doesn't stay in that part of the world. And China is very closely watching what's happening in Washington and in Ukraine.
Yeah, a lot of analysts, Moshe, really feel like the U.S. selling out Ukraine here and not realizing how much leverage America, all of Europe, actually have in the situation against Russia. As for what happens now, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff expected to meet with Vladimir Putin today.
Yeah, but at the same time, if you look at American sentiment and you look at the people, particularly who voted for Trump, there is this exhaustion with the U.S. role in the world, and you're seeing that play out, right? The dynamic that has existed for 80 plus years here since, World War II and afterwards is that the U.S. is basically the protector of stability in the world, and Trump, and especially his J.D. Vance wing of the party, are like, nope, we're done with this. We're done with our role. It's time to focus on America. But what that then means, whether that creates more stability or less stability, well, a number of people are arguing, well, that's going to destabilize things because bad actors, so-called bad actors in the world, will view this as a green light to say, America's done policing things, so time to take what we've been waiting to take for a very long time.
Okay, time for the speed read. Moshe, we wrapped up the top of the podcast by mentioning Envoy Steve Witkoff and his talks today with Vladimir Putin, but now to his other talks with Iran. This story from Axios, the Iranian foreign minister telling White House envoy Steve Witkoff during nuclear talks on Saturday that it might not be possible to reach a final nuclear deal on President Trump's proposed timetable. They're asking whether the sides should first negotiate an interim deal. President Trump has set a 2-month deadline for negotiations with Iran and ordered a buildup of U.S. military forces in the Middle East in case diplomacy fails. If a deal is not reached, the president could order a U.S. military strike against Iran's nuclear facilities or support an Israeli strike. A senior U.S. official had previously said Witkoff and the Iranians had, quote, made very good progress during those talks in Rome.
The Iranians apparently telling the Americans here that due to the very technical nature of these nuclear talks, we're talking about uranium enrichment levels, what supervision, what authentication would be part of this deal. It'll be very difficult to meet the 60-day deadline that they currently have. So they're looking at some interim deal. Now, the Americans so far have said, no. There will be no interim deal. We want a comprehensive deal, and we want it within the next 2 months here. So we'll see if that can happen. We'll see if there's an extension here. But ultimately, as we've been telling you, as we watch these talks so far, these talks appear very similar to the deal that Obama made with Iran a decade ago that Trump pulled out of because he said it was too weak and gave them too much. So we are still looking for more details here to see exactly what concessions the U.S. can pull out of Iran here, especially as we told you that Iran is very much at a weak point here after the Israeli pummeling of Hezbollah, of Hamas, the taking out of a lot of Iranian military hardware in those exchanges they had with the Israelis last year. Also, the Iranians have sold a lot of drones and weaponry to the Russians. So the Iranian economy also at a weak point. So there's a feeling, especially from the Israelis and some from more hardliners in the U.S. government, that this is a weak point from Iran and they could get a lot more out of Iran here. But we'll see what comes of it and how much Trump is prioritizing a deal here. It often comes up in his exchanges in the Oval Office, Jill, that Trump is very much looking for a Nobel Peace Prize. And he's hoping that potentially his pathway to that is a huge deal with Iran.
Yes, it actually came up on Thursday, and he was saying, look, I could have gotten one, or maybe I still can get one for the Abraham Accords, in which some Arab countries normalized relations with Israel. He was saying that more countries want to get involved in that as well. So yes, clearly, I think the Nobel Prize on the president's mind. From the BBC, a big election north of the U.S. border. Canadians will be heading to the polls Monday to decide whether Prime Minister Mark Carney's Liberal Party maintains the reins or whether the Conservatives will return to power for the first time in nearly a decade. The results will have big implications for Canada's relationship with the United States. President Trump's tariffs and his repeated threats of annexing Canada as the 51st state have done damage to the long-standing relationship between the two countries. Canadians not too pleased with Trump's moves, and some of the backlash has given the Liberal Party new life after it appeared that this was going to be a wipeout. A record 7.3 million people have actually already voted in early ballots. Carney, if you remember, was picked by his party to take over from former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau after he stepped down earlier this year.
So just some numbers here for our largely American audience. There's 41 million people in Canada, 29 million eligible voters. So you've already had about 25% of Canadians vote early here going into Monday. And like we told you, going through January there, for the most part, this appeared to be a conservative wipeout, that this would be their chance to retake power here. And we've really seen a flip. A lot of responsibility there by Donald Trump, who, when he was going ahead with his 51st state talk, I mean, he said it as recently as yesterday, and the tariffs, that very much had a rally around the flag effect that has boosted the Liberals there. Justin Trudeau stepping down and letting Mark Carney take over, especially with Carney's central bank background, his economic background, have given a lot of folks in Canada who are thinking about going a different direction, hey, well, it's not Trudeau for yet another term. Maybe it's time to stick with the Liberals. If Mark Carney is there, Mark Carney doesn't have much of a political background because he was a central banker. So the thought is that that was a key move there by the Liberals. And the way that he's painted his conservative opponent, Poilievre, is that, well, this is Trump too. Now, they're very different. There's tonally some similarities there, talking about Canada first, like Trump talks about America first, but not similar. I mean, Canadian politics overall on the spectrum to the left of American politics, even the Conservative Party up there. Nonetheless, it has had an impact there on Poilievre. The feeling is that Carney has been strong in terms of fighting back against Trump. And so far, the polling has looked like it's in his favor. Now, a reminder, the way it works in Canadian elections is you don't directly elect the prime minister. You instead vote for your member of parliament, and they represent your local, the equivalent of a congressional district. And that is effectively how you vote eventually for the party that would elect the prime minister. So that's something we'll be watching on Monday. And it'll be interesting to see whether there's any sort of like last second change here, but trend lines do show like it's good news for the Liberals. Certainly, Jill, some Democrats in the US will be watching that being like, if only Biden had pulled a Trudeau and actually resigned in enough time for us to have a primary and a different leader, maybe we would have had a shot. And that's the way I compare it, is Trudeau basically got out in enough time in a way that Biden didn't. Now, again, very different trend lines there, but some of the same issues, some of the same issues that have propelled or were propelling conservatives to power, the feeling of inflation, the dealing with migrants, a number of issues that have had resonance here in the US, some similar issues there in Canada, but that change there when it comes to Liberal Party leadership looks like it's had an effect.
From NBC News, the man who opened fire at a 4th of July parade near Chicago back in 2022, killing 7 people, will spend the rest of his life behind bars with no possibility of parole. The 24-year-old was a no-show for the sentencing hearing that started on Wednesday, and he declined to make a statement to the court. The judge handed out the maximum sentence, saying, quote, "The court finds that he is irrevocably depraved. He is beyond any rehabilitation." He pleaded guilty last month to charges in that mass shooting that wounded nearly 50 more people in addition to the 7 deaths. Moshe, we covered it extensively here on the podcast. I know, hitting very close to home for you, having grown up nearby.
Yeah, just a few miles away. My grandparents were in Highland Park. My dad's cabinet shop, his business was in Highland Park. I had my best friend and his family actually attended the parade and had to run away when the gunshots broke out with their children. So it's one of those things that, these mass shootings, like, you sadly don't think it'll happen to you, but inevitably in this America that we live in, it's only a matter of time. So I definitely heard from some of them today, to the extent that one can get closure after watching their community fall victim to a mass shooting and their friends and family impacted in a number of ways. I was struck by this quote from a resident of Highland Park who was in the courtroom who said, "We just all held our breath to just make sure that he would never, ever be free again. And now that that's happened, it's like we can all exhale knowing that he will not be free."
Right. Not an unexpected decision, but certainly one that perhaps, I hate the word closure because there's really no closure, but another step to moving forward. All right. In much lighter news from USA Today, it might be unconventional, but there are plenty of couples out there, even married ones, who are opting to live in different places. Some TikTokers are even referring to these couples by a trendy name, Apart-Ners. Get it? Like partners, but Apart-Ners.
Stop trying to make fetch happen, Jill.
Stop trying to make Apart-Ners happen. No one even understands what you're saying.
Nobody even gets it.
If you have to explain it, it's not catchy enough. It doesn't work. People who do this also refer to themselves as LAT, or living apart together, or LAT, maybe. Is that how they say it?
That's so lat.
So even though this is getting some buzz on TikTok, the concept is actually not new. Relationship and mental health experts say it's an arrangement that can work pretty well for some couples who get along with each other better while they live in separate places. So you've got celebs like Gwyneth Paltrow and Sarah Paulson. They've talked about their living arrangements with their significant others, saying in recent years that they live separately from their partners, sometimes in entirely different parts of the country.
Jill, isn't the term for this just separated?
No, because they're together, right? I think that they're monogamous, or they're in these monogamous relationships, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
They just don't live in the same place.
Yeah. All right. Listen, Paltrow has shared that she and her husband live in different houses. Cheryl Lee Ralph of Abbott Elementary, she says that she and her husband live in different states. In some ways, living apart together can be thought of as a more extreme version of what they call sleep divorce, which is also apparently common, where a couple sleep in different beds or in different rooms in the home. Jill, I know that you have preached the benefits of the so-called sleep divorce at times.
Yes, it started for my husband and I because I've always worked really unorthodox schedules, like overnight shifts or super early in the morning, where I'd have to go to sleep at like 7 o'clock at night or get up at 3 a.m. So I would go to bed and my husband would fall asleep on the couch or in a different room. And then I don't know, I think we kind of just got used to it. We don't do it every night, but there definitely are benefits to it. You can sleep better when you're by yourself.
And if you sleep better, you're in a better mood, which could lead to a better relationship.
It's been working for us.
Jill, you're not alone. I remember, some of you might have been following us on Instagram a few years ago when we were having the top sheet debate. There was a story out about millennials kicking off the top sheet and just using a duvet. And so I opened it up to the Instagram community and was getting notes from people about how they sleep. And then we got into sleeping arrangements. And then some of you who have 2 twin beds that you put together and then apart at times. And then some of you who sleep in different rooms. And it was fascinating. And by the way, some of you overshared, but it was fascinating to know exactly how many of you and your arrangements, and some of you, very much preach the benefits. And so now I guess the new trend is Apart-Ners, Jill. Depending on if you guys get a deal on a couple houses, maybe you buy each other a house.
I don't think that's in the cards for us. I think maybe sleeping in a bed in the room next door for a few hours of the night is about as far as we're going to go. All right, it is Friday. Cheers to the freaking weekend. Time for what we are watching, reading, and eating. Moshe, we're watching, I think, the same thing this weekend.
Want to say it together? 3, 2, 1. You. It is the final season. It is out on Netflix. That is the drama with Penn Badgley, where he plays like sort of a psychopath, right? But
no,
like a lovable psychopath.
Like an actual psychopath,
like
not sort of.
Like actual psychopath. But like a lovable psychopath. Like sometimes you feel sympathy for him in this show.
Yes.
Yes. It's got this narrative thing. It's a psychological thriller series. It's been on for several seasons now. This is the final season, the 5th season. And like we love about Netflix, they drop the entire season together. You don't have to wait every week for episodes. So I think we both know what we'll be doing this weekend, and we'll have to discuss it on Monday if we can cram in all the episodes. I don't know if I can pull it off this weekend. We'll see.
I don't either. By the way, I did finish Running Point, that show on Netflix that I mentioned either last week or 2 weeks ago with Kate Hudson. She takes over this basketball team that her family owns. Highly recommend. It's light, it's fun, it goes quickly.
My wife was watching that. She suggested that to me. Right now, we just finished Paradise on Hulu, which is a sort of murder mystery meets futuristic post-apocalyptic America based in a future White House underground. It's interesting. It has like a climate element to it. So it's got politics, it's got thriller.
It feels intense.
It's intense. It is totally intense, but I enjoyed it. So that's Paradise on Hulu. So definitely look into that. And then our new favorite series, and because it's over on Apple, we only get one episode a week, is Friends and Neighbors with John Hamm over on Apple TV. Jill, what are you reading?
All right, so I am reading this weekend. It happened in Italy, untold stories of how the people of Italy defied the horrors of the Holocaust. On Thursday night to mark International Holocaust Remembrance Day, I saw this author, the person who wrote it, Elizabeth Bettina, and she was talking about how 80% of the Jews from Italy actually survived the war, and about how many Italians helped to protect Jews during the Holocaust by hiding them in internment camps. She focuses on the town of Campania and the survivors from that town. But at this talk that she gave, she was showing pictures of a quote unquote concentration camp in Italy. And you can compare it to some of the images that we have seen from Auschwitz, for example. And you could see some of the Italian Jews, they're able to go to school, hold services. So I think it really underscores how the local populations played a really big role in the fate of the Jews, even though in many cases they said, look, we're being invaded as well. There's nothing that we could do. How, those upstanders, as they're called, or the righteous Gentiles, made all the difference.
Jill, along those lines, for local New Yorkers, there's a Holocaust Remembrance portrait exhibit that is in New York through this weekend. It's actually very interesting. It's called Borrowed Spotlight, and it brings together Holocaust survivors and celebs, taking really amazing photos together as a way to spark conversation. And so this exhibit through this weekend called Borrowed Spotlight, it's at the Detour Gallery in the Chelsea neighborhood of Manhattan. So give Borrowed Spotlight a search and check it out if you happen to be in town.
I've seen some of those clips on social media. There was one survivor who was introducing herself and said, hi, I'm so-and-so. And she was introducing herself to Cindy Crawford. And she's like, hi, I'm Cindy Crawford. And it was just funny because Cindy Crawford, you would think that she would have known
right,
who
and the
she
Holocaust survivor
is.
was like, I have no idea who you are. Yeah.
Anyway, very cool concept. All right, Moshe, what are you reading?
So, Jill, among the many books out right now as the Democrats try to fix themselves is a book that's getting a lot of attention by Mark Dunkelman. He's a professor. He has a book out called simply Why Nothing Works. And this actually came up in my conversation this week with Congressman Richie Torres. And if you haven't heard that, that's on the Premium podcast through this weekend. Richie Torres, Democratic congressman, but also self-critical of the Democrats. And so he, as we talked about some of the various strategies Democrats are pursuing, thought that Why Nothing Works by Mark Dunkelman gives a pretty good blueprint to Democrats. So I'll be checking that out. All right, Jill, let's close it out. What are you eating?
Moshe, now that egg prices have finally come down a little bit, I have been eyeing an egg salad recipe. I know that egg salad seems pretty easy. It's like you mash up hard-boiled eggs, you put a little mayo, salt, and pepper. But I'm trying to elevate my egg salad game. So I am going to be making myself some egg salad with dill and onions and mustard.
Sounds elevated to me, Jill.
Now I just have to find, 45
Fancy.
minutes to do it.
You're gonna put some Grey Poupon on it?
No, that would be way too elevated. I'm talking yellow mustard. Moshe, what are you eating?
It's more like what I'm drinking, Jill. Sam Adams Summer Ale, just in time for the summer. I just had one as we taped this podcast. Could you tell? You
do seem giddy.
Giddy. Am I giddy on the first beer? Anyway, yeah, Sam Adams Summer Ale. I'm in D.C. this weekend as part of White House Correspondents' Weekend. There's a bunch of various events that I'll be at. But for those of you listening to this podcast, if you have any suggestions, I haven't lived in D.C. for like more than 10 years now. So any good restaurants or bakeries or breakfast spots or coffee shops that I should check out, please message the account and let me know what I'm missing out on and what I need to check out while I'm in town.
Why don't you just give out your phone number? Would that be?
That's a certain level of Mo News Premium. Like there's Mo News Premium members. If you pay a certain amount, you can give. I don't know if I'm putting
That's
it on
Mo
this
News
podcast.
Premium Gold.
Mo News Premium Gold Elite. You get text message privileges with me.
We kid. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to the Mo News podcast. We really appreciate it. Tell your friends about us. Write us a kind review. It really does help us grow.
Jill, our latest review by Alyssa Rose 924. I love the dynamic with Mo and Jill. They deliver the news in a nonpartisan way, still finding a way to have fun while doing it.
Thanks, Alyssa.
Thanks, Alyssa. We do have fun. Everyone, send Jill any tips on homes coming up for sale on Long Island. Send me restaurants in DC. We have a long list of requests from all of you, but thank you very much for being with us this week. We'll see you back here on Monday.
And in exchange, I will share my egg salad recipe if, in fact, it comes out good.
And in exchange, I will share my phone number for the elite members.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the Mo News podcast. Have a fantastic day. I hope you enjoyed.